It's good to have you back. I ought to start by asking, where have you been hiding in the gap since we last saw and heard from you?
Hiding? No, I've been working very hard. We went to CBS Records in 1978 and virtually disappeared. A lot of political problems. The contract ran out in 83. I was there 5 years. I decided to try to raise private monies for my own labels, distribution, and, independency. And the worst side of that was if I didn't get the money, if I didn't get the $8 million, then I would be out of my own personal money and out of time. And we got within 3 days of getting the $8 million. Our money was tied to people in Dallas, Texas, whose money was tied to oil. 3 days before we were to get $8.5 million, we got a call from Dallas that they had gone broke. It wiped out Texas, and it almost wiped me out, too.
So it's nice to know that it's not just Wall Street and the London Stock Exchange that have been suffering problems in 1987. Listen, it's great having you here. Thank you for picking the records. We're going to start with something from the Drifters. Why have you chosen this?
This is a very sentimental songs to me. All these songs represent different periods in my life. I remember the first day I heard This Magic Moment. It was on a Sunday. And I could not believe the arrangement, Benny King's delivery, the Drifters' sound, everything was just perfect. And the title really said it all for this song, This Magic Moment.
Do songwriters mean a lot to you, Barry? I mean, as a songwriter yourself, do you have favorite teams of writers?
Yes. My favorite all-time teams of writing is Holland, Dozier and Holland, Burt Bacharach and Hal David, Gamble and Huff. These are people who have probably written more great songs as a team. Lieber and Stoller is also one of those writing teams, I must also add. They came before Holland, Dozier and Holland. I love to see great masters at work, Andy. Even when I was listening then, I knew that whoever was writing those songs were really writers. You know what I mean? They weren't just those songs you'd hear once and never hear of the artist again. These writers would keep coming back and back and back. And as you know, Lieber Stroller did not only the Drifters, the Coasters. Holland, Dozier and Holland was responsible for the Supremes and Four Tops. Burt Bacharach and Hal David was very greatly responsible for Dionne Warwick. So,
You're giving a few clues away as to what we might hear later, but I don't mind. We'll look forward to it. We'll get to the songs later on. Let me just talk to you about early life. I'm right in saying that you spent most of your youth in Watts in Los Angeles, didn't you? Most of the things that people did in Watts, rather like Harlem in New York, tended, I think, at times to be fairly naughty, didn't they? It was a pretty heavy place to live.
It's a very heavy place to live. It's rough, very tough, because you have to learn very early in age, 5, 6 years old, how to survive, to keep from getting shot or killed or beat up or whatever it is. What it does is if you're able to survive it, it makes you a certain kind of a person. You see so many different personalities. You hear so many con games. You see so much violence. It's just things that you have to learn to live with.
But you didn't really go out and burgle other people's record collections.
Oh, yeah. That's all I took, though.
I read this with horror in the press. I thought, well, at least the man's got taste if he went for the records.
That's all I took out of your home was your record collection.
Specifically American soul artists, I've known, on the original labels.
Jazz, anything I could get, Andy. The 70s at 20th Century were perfect. Everything was perfect.
Looking back on those records, your intimacy, if you like, as a recording artist, what do you think now you were trying to achieve? I mean, was it an intimacy with the listener?
Oh, yeah. That's my objective. That's the Barry White formula. Every artist that I've heard who had more than one hit record stood for something, whether it was war, peace, Don't Go Breaking My Heart, I Love You More Than Anything. Everybody has something to talk about. And my approach was communication between men and women. And the best way to say it, the most interesting arrangements I could put to that, that's what my whole formula is about. That's what Barry White's sound is, bringing people together.
Are you a hard taskmaster?
I'm a strict person. I'm a person who believes in discipline. I believe that when it's time to work, it's time to work. When it's time to play, it's time to play, and never confuse the two.
But not the James Brown principle of fining people for bum notes.
Oh, no. I don't do that. No, I don't go to the extreme. I've seen James Brown make a quick spin and point at somebody on stage and say, $50, $100, $200. I mean, he'd just be finding them on the stage. So JB, he is the Godfather. He has his own method of madness.
He's a remarkable performer.
Yes, he is.
And so is Dionne Warwick. And we turn now to a Burt Bacharach and Hal David composition, one of many beautiful tunes. They were a formidable writing team, weren't they?
They were brilliant. The three of them, Burt Bacharach, Hal David, and Dionne Warwick, to me was almost like a singing group. Hal David would do lyrics, Burt Bacharach would do melodies, music, and together they would give it to Dionne and she would deliver. That was a beautiful combination, man. And they had many, many, many hits. Dionne Warwick, to me, above all female artists, she would represent the queen to me. Her class about herself, the way she carries herself, her shows, the delivery of her music. Dionne Warwick is more of a total artist to me than any artist on the scene.
Well, we're going to finish with a young man who had a bit of a problem in his life recently because he tried very hard to follow up the biggest selling album of all time. And we're back with your beloved and my beloved Motown, because from Gary, Indiana, Michael Jackson.
Michael is very close to my family. I am very proud of Michael's career. I feel very much responsible for a lot of good advice Michael got concerning the Off the Wall album. A lot of people was against Michael recording that album. His heart was broken, and he came to my home, and we spent hours discussing it. He was heartbroken. He didn't understand why nobody wanted him to record Off the Wall by himself. The problem was they didn't want him to go by himself. And I told Michael, never let any man or any woman be the deciding factor in your creativity, because once you give in to that, you will become a slave to it. When Michael and I got through talking, Michael went into the studio. He had already had Quincy on his mind to do the album, and he went in and recorded the album, and I've got to say, Off the Wall was just that. Off the Wall, to me, that was Michael's greatest album. That's nice.
You were just saying you reckon if that was reissued, it could become a number one all over again.
It could, if it was recorded by the right female voice. It could be a number one smash today.
You're probably aware we've had a pretty strange 18 months in Britain because due to a lot of television commercials which have used clips from old records,
I know.
A great number of reissued tracks have become hits again.
That's right.
Ironically, we had the late, great Jackie Wilson at number one in the charts, which just struck me as so ironic, that a talent of that sort of...
Which song of Jackie's?
Reet Petite.
Wow.
And isn't that unbelievable?
That's unbelievable.
After
That's really
all these years.
Yeah.
But that still sounds very good. Do you think it's the simplicity of recording that made it sound so tight? I mean,
yeah, plus a hit song sounds good, Andy, the day it's released and 20 years later. There are some songs that are recorded only for that moment, that when you play them later, they won't sound good. But great hit songs sound good, I don't care when you play them.
Where did the voice come from, Barry? Because, you know...
I woke up one morning, Andy, and spoke to my mother and scared us both half to death. It was unbelievable.
Great quote.
Unbelievable.
It's wonderful, you know, but I mean, those of us who work in broadcasting are relatively proud of our voices. Working with you, I feel like Kermit the Frog.
Oh, you shouldn't feel like that, Andy. You have a great speaking voice.
Have you caused problems for engineers in recording studios?
Yeah.
I mean, masterminding your own productions, I know, but I would imagine you're not the easiest guy in the world.
No, it is very tricky to record Barry White because of his low voice and the resonance in his low voice. But we've been able over the years to handle his voice, but it is a tricky thing.
How are you when you get a cold, for instance? I mean, does it make a bit of a difference?
It's even lower.
It can't be any lower.
Yeah.
Let's go back to your early days in music. Where did it all start? Were you, like so many other people, influenced by gospel music in the church?
Right, Andy. 1949, I was 4 years old, I started harmonizing with my mother to Silent Night. When I turned 5, I started getting interested in piano. My mother could teach piano, but I didn't want to learn to read and write music. I just wanted to touch those keys, you know.
Have you learned to read and write since?
No. If you brought a Barry White song to Barry White and said, I've got $1 million in this hand and a lead sheet in this one with no title on it, which hit song is it of yours? I'd missed $1 million.
That's extraordinary. But when you get in and work with people like Gene Page, for instance, sort of arranging strings and what have you, what happens then? Do you just tell him what you want?
I play it down on a tape, piano line, or I'll hum it out, the cello parts, the strings, the horns, whatever it is, and he just writes it down so that I can communicate with the musicians. He can't write down the attitude of what I'm saying. He can only write down the notes. I have to give the musicians the attitude once I get to the studio.
So in those early days, the big man, Barry White, it strikes me, even then, were you looking for big productions? I mean,
I've always cut multi-instruments because there's violas, cellos, French horns, oboes. There's a lot of things in music other than a guitar, bass, piano, and drums. But
it's not the cheapest lineup in the world to put in a studio or take on the road, though, is it?
No, it isn't. It's very expensive to take on the road. It's very expensive to record. But it also brings a distinction. If you are good at what you're doing, you will have a distinctful sound that is different than anybody else's.
Well, talking of sounds, you mentioned Dozier Holland at the top of the program. Here comes one of their songs from Diana Ross and the Supremes. Is this one of your all-time favorites?
Yes, it is. Yeah, this is when Motown sound was starting to be created. Motown never had a sound until Holland, Dozier, and Holland appeared on the scene with the Supremes and the Four Tops. There was no Motown sound prior to that. So they weren't only responsible for success, they were also responsible for creating a new sound.
Diana Ross and the Supremes and Baby Love, written by Brian and Eddie Holland, and Lamont Dozier, who I had the pleasure of meeting a couple of years ago. What a nice man. That particular Motown sound, I was just saying to you, Smokey Robinson recently guested on this program and explained, or rather exploded the myth that it was all recorded in Hitsville in Detroit. He said, no, we used to cut records in different places and still come up with the same sound.
Because it was the creative force. It doesn't matter where you record at because it still starts with the song. Without the song, you can use the most flamboyant equipment, you can use the finest musicians in the world. It don't mean a thing if you don't have the song.
I'm interested to note on your new album that you give credit to Mr. Berry Gordy.
Right. Well, Berry Gordy is like my mentor, my godfather. He's given me a lot of advice over the years. He was very instrumental in my move in trying to get independent. Berry Gordy has done something few men in our world have done, to build a record company the size of Motown in 1966, 7, and 8. It was the #1 company in the world. And when you compare that to Berry Gordy Jr., who was a baby when Capitol Records started in Columbia, to grow up and surpass them in sales, that's really saying something.
Mr. Versatility, because of course he wrote those hit records for Jackie Wilson as well, didn't he?
Yeah, he wrote Lonely Teardrops.
Some talent.
Well, he also wrote Money by Barrett Strong.
That's right.
Berry Gordy is a fluent songwriter himself and record producer.
So if he'd phoned you up and said, would you like to sign to Motown, what would you have said?
No, I would have said no. I was offered a job in 1967 from Motown. I was better with Motown away from Motown. I am probably one of the greatest students of Motown. That was the university that I attended from the year of 1960 up until 1969. And when I say attended that University of Motown, I mean I had every Motown record. And for hours, I would go to Hollywood like 9 in the morning, get home about 4:30 or 5. From 5 o'clock to 1 o'clock that morning, it was me and Motown. And I mean, I heard the hits, the songs that weren't hits, because all I do is walk in a record shop and say, give me everything new on Motown.
It's funny, I used to do exactly the same thing.
Yeah, you didn't care what it was. Just give me... Motown, believe it or not, Motown's name is bigger than any artist it ever had.
Yes, that's a very interesting statement.
That's the only company that has that status.
Yeah. I look at the credits on your album again, and I note with great interest the name Brenda Holloway. I assume that is the same lady.
That is the same lady. Brenda Holloway and I go back to 1966. To me, she was the greatest female singer on that label.
That's some compliment.
It's very true. Brenda Holloway was stronger than Diana, stronger than Martha, stronger. She was the strongest woman on that label.
Now then, the Flamingos, not too far away from the world of doo-wop, I suppose.
Not too far away.
Did you sing on street corners in your youth in Watts?
Oh, yeah. Nighttime, daytime, evening, we sung. We used to greet each other coming down the street. We just break into a song, and all of a sudden you see these 5 guys coming up on each other, all singing, and once we get together, we all hit them harmony notes. Yeah, we used to do that.
There's an incredible radio station in New York, CBS FM, which on a Sunday afternoon used, I don't know whether they still do it, to do 2 hours of doo-wop music.
Wow.
It's just wonderful.
Well, that's where our industry today came from. Without doo-wop, we couldn't sit here today. The Flamingos were the beginning of a new era of group. We had the Platters, who had just as many hits as any other group, probably more than most. But they were more conservative. They weren't as flashy dresses. They were more of that tuxedo thing. The Flamingos, the fact that it was 6 of them, not 5 or 4, it was 6 of them. They had a style of singing, harmony, and the thing that made the Flamingos, to me, the greatest male group of the 50s was the fact that not only did they sound a certain way on record, when you went to their show, man, they blew you away.
You made a very interesting statement while we were enthusing listening to the Flamingos about the world of religion.
Yeah, well,
and soul music in America.
My people, black people, have a habit of when their career is not showing the right results, in other words, if they're not getting the records they were getting, they're quick to get despair and run to religion. And what happens is most of them disappear. It's something that people don't like mixing the two, I think.
Denise Williams cut a gospel album recently, didn't she?
Yeah.
She went in the studio and did one.
Yeah. They don't do too well because once you've been established as a rock and roller, it doesn't cross over so well to a lot of people, especially people who respect religion, people who are involved in it. Little Richard had that syndrome,
That's
back
right.
and forth. There's been many of us that do it. My thing is, if you can find religion when your career's down, keep the religion when it goes up, and they don't do that. You know, if they don't get a hit, they join church. If they get a hit, they leave church. You know, it's amazing. Now, believe it or not, Aretha is the exception to the rule.
Yeah.
She has made gospel albums that have been very successful. But Aretha does not run back and forth to church. Aretha has professed the church from the time she started. She's never stopped giving you gospel renditions in her delivery of her songs. So for some reason, the world just associates Aretha with all of it. But most artists cannot do that, man. They can't do it.
Let me take you back to the days of Love Unlimited and Walking in the Rain on Uni Records.
Yeah.
All those years ago. How much Barry White recorded material or Barry White associated material had there been before that arrived on the record scene?
Very little. Scattered stuff. I was doing productions, but no records were coming out. I worked on a lot of hit records as a musician, voice arranger, meaning background, doing background for different producers. But until Walking in the Rain came, I had 2 #1 records in London, England in 1966, I Feel Love Coming On, and It May Be One Outside by Felice Taylor. But it wasn't no significant value as far as having a big hit record. There was no big hit record until 1972, Walking in the Rain with the One I Love.
Right, you mentioned the Whispers a little while ago. We're going to hear something from them now. A band you greatly admire?
Oh, yes. I greatly admire the Whispers. The Whispers have been around longer than the average group. Not with hits, but they were making records. I was following the Whispers before I even got near having a lock on the industry. I used to go to club after club after club and watch Scotty and those 4 guys do their things. My thing is voice. I can tell a great singer by his vibrato. And the Whispers have that Marvin Gaye thing. The Marvin Gaye had the Whispers things. Nat King Cole had that vibrato. Jesse Belvin. It's a strange, smooth, velvety vibrato, and it kills women. It does something to their nerves.
Ladies, be warned.